Have you ever considered that the very system designed to protect us from stress could, in some cases, turn against itself? We're diving into a condition in children called adrenal insufficiency. It's pretty rare, but it's so serious that something as common as a fever can become a life or death situation. So today, we're going to unpack this medical mystery piece by piece. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the most intense moment, the adrenal crisis. From there, we'll work our way backward, kind of like detectives, to figure out what's going on with the body's stress command center and the two main ways it can break down. Then we'll look at the clues for a diagnosis and wrap up with how kids and their families actually manage this day to day. You know, to really get a handle on adrenal insufficiency, we can't just start with the basics. We have to look at it at its absolute worst. We have to start with the adrenal crisis. This is that terrifying moment when the body's internal safety net just fails. Just think about that for a second. A simple stomach bug, a fever, even a minor fall, things that are just a normal part of being a kid, could suddenly spiral into a true medical emergency. And that question right there, that's exactly why understanding this condition is so important for anyone who cares for a child. Okay, so what is an adrenal crisis? Well, at its core, it's a catastrophic supply and demand problem. When the body is under stress, it's screaming for a massive flood of a hormone called cortisol to help it cope. But with adrenal insufficiency, the supply just isn't there. The demand totally overwhelms the system, and that's what triggers a complete breakdown. And when this breakdown happens, it's not subtle. I mean, look at these signs. We're talking about this incredibly fast cascade of symptoms: vomiting, extreme weakness, just total lethargy. The body's fundamental systems start to go offline, leading to dangerously low blood sugar and a critical drop in blood pressure. This is a 5-alarm fire, a medical emergency that needs help, like, right now. All right, so you're probably wondering, how is this crisis supposed to be stopped? To really get why the system fails, we first need to understand how it's designed to work perfectly. So let's pull back the curtain on the body's amazing stress command system, the HPA axis. The HPA axis, that stands for hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis, is pretty much the body's chain of command for dealing with stress. You can just think of it as a super sophisticated direct communication line that runs from the brain all the way down to the adrenal glands. And it works in this perfect 3-step sequence. Step 1, it all kicks off in the brain, where the hypothalamus sends out a signal. Step 2, the pituitary gland gets that signal and releases its own messenger hormone, called ACTH. And finally, step 3, the adrenal glands get the message from that ACTH, and boom, they release cortisol, our #1 stress-fighting hormone, into the bloodstream. When it's all working, it's like a perfectly timed orchestra. Okay, so we know how it should work. Now for the big question, where does it all go wrong? Well, it turns out there are 2 main places the system can break down, and that leads us to 2 different types of adrenal insufficiency. The best way to think about it is like this. With primary AI, the command center, the brain is doing its job perfectly. It's sending out the orders. But the problem is down at the factory. The adrenal glands themselves are broken and just can't make any cortisol. Now, with central AI, it's the opposite. The factory is fine, ready to go. But the problem is upstream. The orders from the brain, that ACTH signal, they never get sent out. The adrenal glands are just sitting there, waiting for a command that never shows up. All right, with that framework in mind, we can start following the clues. Let's look at the specific signs and symptoms that doctors use to tell these 2 conditions apart and really get to the bottom of what's causing the problem. Now, one of the biggest challenges, especially early on, is that the symptoms can be just so frustratingly vague. You know, fatigue, feeling sick in the morning, not wanting to eat. I mean, that could be a million different things, right? And this is why a diagnosis often gets delayed. One study even found that almost half of adult patients had symptoms for over a year before they finally got the right answer. But there are some really specific, almost giveaway clues that point directly to primary AI. Remember how the brain sends out that ACTH signal? Well, when the adrenal glands aren't responding, the brain just screams louder and louder, flooding the body with ACTH. And a really fascinating side effect of all that extra ACTH is that it stimulates our skin's pigment cells, causing this unique bronze-like skin tone. You combine that with a strong craving for salt, and those are classic telltale signs. So what's the usual suspect when we're talking about kids? Well, it's usually not the same causes you see in adults. In the pediatric world, genetic issues are the most common cause by far. And the #1 culprit is something called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. It affects about 1 in every 15,000 births. So all of this brings us to the most important part, the solution. What's the plan? Because with the right management and a whole lot of empowerment, kids with adrenal insufficiency absolutely can live full, happy, active lives. The treatment strategy, at its heart, is actually pretty straightforward. If the body can't make its own cortisol, well, then we have to give it some. This is usually done with daily doses of a medication called hydrocortisone, and it's timed really carefully to mimic the body's natural cortisol rhythm. Now, this right here, this is probably the single most life-saving piece of the puzzle. It's the sick day rules playbook. Families learn to spot the signs of physical stress, like a fever. As soon as they do, they immediately give a bigger stress dose of the oral medication. And here's the most critical part. If the child is throwing up or can't take the medicine, they give an emergency injection. This protocol is the key to stopping a simple illness from turning into a full-blown crisis. And really, this quote from the NIH just says it all, doesn't it? It's not just about managing a long-term condition. It's about actively preventing a life-threatening emergency. Awareness, recognizing the signs quickly, and taking immediate action, that's what saves lives. So that leaves us with this one last really big question that goes way beyond just this one condition. When the early signs of something serious can look so much like something minor, how can we do a better job of empowering parents to really trust their gut instincts? How do we encourage them to be fierce advocates for their kids, to keep pushing for answers when they know deep down that something just isn't right?